Hello, everyone, and good evening to the SLN live show. So, on behalf of SLN, I would like to welcome all of you, and thank you, Ms. Chami, who's joining us from Bhutan, for moderating this discussion. Over to you, Chami.
Thank you so much, Hussain. Good evening, everyone. Kuzzampola and Namaste. My name is Charmi Chedda, and I work with the Royal Academy of Performing Arts, Bhutan. To say something about myself, I'm from India and from Bhutan, and I guess that is why I'm here moderating this session. Actually, looking forward to it. It's more of a learning because we have some very, very special speakers with us. And let me quickly introduce them to you. First, I would like to introduce Mam Tsawang Choden Wongdi from Bhutan. She's the principal of Druk School, and I've had the great fortune of working with her as well. Absolutely dynamic. Mam Tsawang, welcome. So happy to have you here. And our next speaker, I would like to introduce Mr. Suresh Naidu. Mr. Suresh Naidu is the Executive Director of Pathway Schools. They have a number of schools, and again, a very dynamic leader and leading so well and so many schools under his wing. So welcome, sir. Welcome to the SLN show. And
thank you. I just wanted to say to all our colleagues in Bhutan, Kozum Pula, and greetings for Bhutan.
That's wonderful.
And namaste from India.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Mr. Hussain Dohatwala. Mr. Hussain is an academician, and he's also an IB and Cambridge academic specialist, and he has been curating and he has been designing many of the Cambridge and IB education, right from standard 6 to about 12th grade. So, Hussain, we really look forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll do the namaste in both the styles, the Indian and as well as the Bhutanese style. I don't know. I hope my camera captured both of that. Thank you, Chami.
Okay, great. And let's get started. Today we have speakers from India. We have Mam Tsawang from Bhutan, and I'm here, as I said, from India and Bhutan. Things are very unique right now. We are going through struggles. I think this whole world is going through this, and education has definitely got a huge setback, as we believe. But at the same time, we have leaders and we have governments of country who are doing everything possible in their capacity to keep this going and to impart education in this new format. We have Indian speakers. Indian schools are operating differently, unlike Bhutan, where in the forefront we have the Ministry of Education. We have the government working hand in hand with the schools. Private schools work in line with the government. But in India, we have a little different way of functioning here, and every school is struggling in their own way to run their curriculum online, especially. So my first question, and that's to all our three speakers, it would be, how has the lockdown changed the way your school and schools in your country, that is India and Bhutan, function? So who would like to go first, love? Let's hear it from Hussain. Why don't we hear it from Hussain first?
Okay, so thanks, Shami, and thank you once again to all our audience, for joining us. I think one of the things what the pandemic has brought in is it probably forced all of us to adapt ourselves and to adopt technology in a way which is unprecedented. So, I've been an educator for 15 years now, and also I know educators who've been in this vertical for the last 25, 30 years, and they've not seen anything like this in their career, what we are seeing today. So the time span in which schools, teachers, the entire community adapted to the online teaching and learning has just been unprecedented. So we've had schools looking at, Zoom, Google Classroom, or, Microsoft Teams. We've had, a lot of government and aided schools using WhatsApp as a medium, teachers recording their own short videos on the concepts that they are teaching and sharing that over WhatsApp. So this entire paradigm is so different. And the great part is that as educators, everyone has truly risen to the occasion. And they've been able to do a fair job over the past 5 weeks to ensure that the learning journey of every child continues. There is no pause. Obviously, one would question in terms of how effective these 5 weeks have been. One thing which we all need to keep in mind is that we had the Janta curfew in India, I'm talking about, and then we had the lockdown, which then got extended, which is due to expire on 3rd of May, but I'm sure it's going to get extended for certain districts, at least even beyond that. Was that, during this entire period, schools had to immediately take their classes online. There was no time to train teachers, to train parents, students, etc. Nonetheless, in this short period of time, everybody moved instruction online. People started using all these different platforms. They started using WhatsApp, etc. And I think the challenge has been that a lot of curriculum and lesson plans which were developed for the physical classroom, similar pedagogies, similar teaching approaches have also been used in the online classroom. And I think that's where, the effectiveness has got limited, because certain approaches which work very well in a physical face-to-face classroom sadly do not work as effectively in an online classroom. Also, we need to also come up with certain essential agreements from a student point of view, because one thing which the 5 weeks have shown us is that the kind of teacher oversight which is possible. So even if I have 40 children in a class, I can still have a look of what each child is doing in a classroom. In an online environment, imagine on a Zoom screen, I cannot physically see all the 40 kids and what each one of them is actually doing. So these are some challenges which we have faced. How do we engage students more effectively? So I think when we plan for the next academic year, the key would be how we can make our curriculum much more student-centric, much more participative, having debates, having a lot of discussion, which is inbuilt in our curriculum, focusing more on things like learning outcome. So I think these 5 weeks will provide a lot of good feedback to us on how we can actually now use this data to inform our teaching and learning for the next academic year. Thank you, Chami.
Thank you so much, Hussain. So as you said that, the pandemic just arrived. Of course, it was unalarmed, and teachers and nobody was really used to this whole structure of coming online. And I guess same thing happened in Bhutan. And but the government and the schools started reacting really fast, and online lessons were prepared. Our national television here, the BBS, started putting classes onto the screen. So I would now like to ask Ma'am Sawang, being the principal of Druk School, Ma'am, what is your take on this, love?
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kuzuzongpula from the land of gross national happiness. I bring to each one of you lots and lots of good health and peace of mind. Thank you, Chami. Let me start off with a little brief, because I think Bhutan is a little different from India, and would like to tell you that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected Bhutan and the Bhutanese in an unprecedented way. It is a very challenging and a difficult time, but with the great visionary leadership of our most precious king, supported by the government, the lockdown that is in place in Bhutan is not as serious as in other parts of the world. It's only the international borders that are closed, but the Bhutanese do live a normal life in the towns and villages, with the exception of being very responsible and following all the precautionary modes to prevent community transmission of novel coronavirus. Only schools and tertiary institutions are closed, but the teachers are all working full-time to ensure education is continued with new imagination, creativity, and new thinking. A lot of out-of-the-box strategies are being tried, which is proving beneficial to the learners. More collaborative approaches between the learners and facilitators are also enhancing the learning processes. Since it's the health that is affected and lives are so much valued in Bhutan, it was very timely decided by the government to close all the schools and tertiary institutions in the country as early as 6th March, thus ensuring the most important group of young citizens were protected immediately. And with this wisdom, we are still very safe, with only 7 imported cases and no community transmission in the last 60 days. The closure of educational institutions definitely changed the way these organizations functioned. from a very close face-to-face interaction in everyday social life, with children being at school for nearly 6 to 8 hours each day, it suddenly became a distance online learning focus, with children spending all the time at home. It did disrupt the normal home life, and the parents did get a little shocked. And with the change, having to take over as a full-time teacher at home, which is very new to our Bhutanese parents. Yet every stakeholder was very positive in the unprecedented change towards e-learning and more effective use of technology. In Bhutan, the Ministry of Education is responsible for the macro policies for the school education, and all schools, irrespective of being private or public schools, do have to follow the same policies. So it was the Ministry of Education under the dynamic leadership of His Excellency, the Education Minister, Mr. J.B. Rai, and his team in the Ministry of Education, along with the Royal Education Council, who immediately designed a modified education in emergency curriculum by 12th of March, which focus on the vital objectives of the curriculum, as well as the life skill education, which we think is more important in the education of our children. Ministry of Education also trained teachers in the use of Google Classrooms, Google Meet, and started offering lessons on the national TV channel BBS, facilitated by none other than the volunteer teachers of Bhutan. This macro curriculum is interpreted and implemented by the schools with their own complementary and supplementary micro policies, content, input, and teaching strategies. And the biggest makeover has been in the teaching strategies, moving to a new dimension of using complete technology-aided platforms for teaching and learning experiences. So the challenge has been and will be to ensure that equity and equality of access to these new experiences available to all the students in the country with diverse circumstances. And that's a challenge. We are all working very closely and with a lot of passion. And so far, I think we have reached all the children in the country. Yeah, thank you, Chami, over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving such a detailed picture of how things are happening in Bhutan. And we are all witnessing this under the leadership of His Majesty, the King of Bhutan, and the Honorable Prime Minister, the Education Minister. We have government playing a huge role and helping keeping everyone together. And I think we're seeing this in Bhutan, that communities are working together, teachers are working together. It's not, even the private schools are not really working individually, but as you have rightly said, ma'am, that the biggest challenge will be to reach to every corner, even the remote villages of Bhutan, and I'm sure we will talk more about that. And now, after hearing from Hussein, who's in Bombay, from Mamsawang, from Bhutan, I would now like to hear from Mr. Naidu, from the Executive Director of the Pathway Schools, Delhi, which again, I'm sure the take is going to be extremely different. So over to you.
So good evening to one and all, and namaste, and kusum zom pula to all our friends in Bhutan. Looking at the whole concept of rethink, revisit, and revive, the most important question that comes is this a boon or a bane? So let me just remind a lot of our viewers and listeners that, when the bubonic plague happened in the mid-1660s, way back, Isaac Newton at that time was also grounded. And instead of getting worried by that, he did some of the remarkable things that today are indispensable. He came up with the laws of motion and gravity, the theory of optics, spectrum of light, and he invented concepts of the calculus. So confinement is not a bad thing, because sometimes it gets your mind working in a very big way. So the question of, everyone knows that online and classrooms are happening. Has it affected the school curriculum? Let me remind people again, in a broader spectrum here, that in the moments of world events and history, there have been so many catastrophic or world-changing events be it the atomic bomb in Japan, or the perestroika in Russia, or the apartheid movement in South Africa. And these were all life-changing and nation-changing and world-changing moments. And yet, people came out of it, adapting and adjusting. Nelson Mandela wouldn't have thought in the 60s and 70s he'll ever become the president of South Africa and that the black empowerment would come up. Russia would have never thought it will get created out of the Soviet Union. And what about the movement in India about independence? Who thought that India would become independent when it did? And yet we all did. And what happened was that we are very resilient and we all adapted to change. And we all converted ourselves from lockdown to freedom. We learned how to create a new sense of freedom rather than keeping it as a confinement. And this is how the transition has happened right now because of COVID-19. And just think of it for a moment for every one of us. We grew up in an era where there was a pencil and a fountain pen. And when the ball pen came into invention and got introduced, there's so much of a debate whether it was good or bad for children and whether we should be using it, whether primary school is good or not. Just look at us today. Is it even an issue? It's not, but it was in those days. And so it happens with all of us. We don't really get caught. What we get into is that an idea whose time had probably come, just like in South Africa in the 1990s or late 80s. What has happened is that in 1 month, the administrators, teachers, students, all have adapted and moved on. They moved on and adapted beautifully for the requirements that there is. And what has changed the fastest is not the curriculum design, but the curriculum delivery. What has changed most is not the teaching, but the learning habits. And what has really caught on was something that people were talking about 20 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 10 years ago. And that's a thing called the learner agency, which is the focus shifts from the teacher to the learner. And the adoption and the adaptation to the new norms of learning, either by default or by deliberation, has come, and now it's come to stay. Initially, we were all skeptical about it. And teachers didn't want to pass on the ownership to the students. They felt they were the controllers, they were the knowledgeable people, and they would run the curriculum. And now, online has taught students to do a lot of learning. So in a nutshell, the students' ownership, making sense out of learning, they want to know what are they learning, why are they learning, the thinking relevance, why, opportunities that have opened out to explore and to connect with the real world out there. I've seen videos and I've seen classes happening of children getting into the kitchen and trying out recipes. I've seen mathematics being converted into a recipe and proportions and calculations and so on. And just look at how the classes are being run now. So the teachers are getting to do more of self-learning and not getting the students to just to learn by rote, but also to get them to explore and to think. The students have made the home their world. Just think of it. Who thought the home would become the classroom? It has. It's become their life right now. And the parents, they are the ones who are following the children's learning, their interests, their talents. They're leaning towards what they like. They are rethinking, revisiting, and rediscovering their own child. There are no more fixed norms of my child should become this or that. And the person who should be most delighted about this would be Howard Gardner, who had in the 1990s, he had come up with this concept of multiple intelligences. And he will finally be getting very happy that his key audience, the parents and the educators, are both beginning to adapt and listen to the child and look at the multiple intelligences and the different challenges and the different talents that they have and develop them. And the children are able to do it more at their paces. The colleges are redefining their courses. The careers are getting redefined. And so really what is happening is there's a tremendous new reawakening of how we want to learn, what we want to learn, how we want to go forward. And I see a lot of positive coming out of this in all the apprehension and all the doubts. Over to you, Charmi.
Thank you so much, sir. So one thing that I can hear from everyone's thoughts and answer is adaptability, change. So our teachers have been able to adapt and are adapting. Of course, it's not easy to suddenly switch on from being in a classroom where you have children reacting and then you come on to something where you don't even know if your learners are really understanding what you are saying, probably. But at the same time, I could hear that the way things are functioning right now in Bhutan probably is a little different because everybody is working together. In India, things are still more at school level. Every school is trying and getting on board. So everything, yes, everything is sounding, so far it's sounding positive. Hussein had something to share, which was about that it was not easy for teachers to adapt still. So I'm coming to my next question, which is, what is your opinion about the positive impact of lockdown, where so far y'all have connected and y'all have said that yes, it is everything is sounding very positive, but I'm sure that across, if you really ask parents, if you really ask teachers, it's not that people are happy. It's not that things are all. In fact, largely, I think people are talking more about the negative impact of the pandemic on education. Can you, as leaders of school, please put light onto something really positive that has come out of this situation? Hussein, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Shami, for that question. So I think I'll, borrow some cues from, what Dr. Naidu was talking about. I think one big positive which has come out from this is the homeschool connect. So, as you're saying, parents today are discovering so many new attributes, so many things that they did not know that their child had. So I actually have a friend, his son was always interested in stand-up comedy. And now he set up his own YouTube channel. And every other day in the evenings, he's actually practicing different gigs and posting it online. And his parents are there to support and encourage him. Now, as you know, right, stand-up comedy as a career choice is not something which a lot of Indian parents are going to encourage kids in. But the lockdown has allowed them this time to, really connect with their child, know the things. Similarly, the connection with the school. Today, parents are so much more involved with what is happening. So I'll talk about my own little one. He's 6 years old. So I exactly know. So he's right now learning a unit about plants. So I'm very clued on to what is he doing. I help him in terms of setting him up for the online sessions. Post the sessions, the work which comes in, if he has to watch a YouTube video or any of that sort, I even help him out with that. In the night, we also ensure if you're reading a story or anything, I try and connect it with what he's learning in class. Now, a lot of this, sadly, was not happening for a lot of us before lockdown. So I think the silver lining in the lockdown cloud is this, the kind of role parents have played, the way parents have truly started multitasking, managing their work from home as well as managing their child's education, and also connecting with schools. So the home and school connect has certainly become strengthened as a result of the lockdown and the pandemic. The other silver lining, I think, is technology. A lot of Indian schools, like, unlike the US, where, to graduate high school, a lot of states in the US require students to do at least 1 or 2 online courses to graduate high school. In India, in the K-12 space, we actually do not have any such requirements. Very, very few schools look at, having children being exposed to online courses. But in higher ed, online courses is certainly becoming the norm in a lot of universities. There are a lot of open universities which are offering online courses. The good thing of the pandemic is we've suddenly got the next generation totally ready with online teaching and learning. So whatever feedback we've got from these 5 weeks, we can definitely use that both as teachers and as students to make it much more effective going forward. So those are the two big positives coming out. The third positive is the usage of EdTech tools. So, I'm very active on social media, and I'm seeing on social media how a lot of teachers are sharing how they're using different EdTech tools and platforms. So suddenly YouTube, Khan Academy is becoming commonplace across schools, be it a CBSE, ICSE, or a Cambridge school. So one EdTech tool which I would specifically like to mention is Edpuzzle. So what Edpuzzle as a tool does, it's a free tool. You can actually edit YouTube videos. It's a very, very easy tool to use. So if, for instance, I have a certain video of parts of a plant, I'll use the same example that I was talking about earlier. And I want to give some context before the video starts, because many times for younger learners, some videos, would start off and children may not be able to connect the video with, the classroom experience. Teachers can add an audio note before the video, so children hear the audio note, they view the entire video, and at the end of the video, you can also inbuild an assessment. So a lot of teachers are using platforms and tools such as Edpuzzle today, and which is definitely revolutionizing the way education is being delivered, and also making it so much more student centric. So I think these are the three big positives. The last positive I'll talk about, a parent and not as an educator, is life skills. So ma'am also spoke a little bit about life skills. And when we look at day schools, sadly, there is not much of life skill development which happens in a lot of day schools. The lockdown time has allowed us as families to look at developing life skills, be it doing something in the kitchen, helping with household chores. All of these are skills which I think are so important. So I actually learned a lot of this only when I went outside my hometown for my MBA. Till that time, I'd taken a lot of things for granted, but with the lockdown, I'm ensuring that my child, who's just 6 year old, learns to do all of this. Is much better equipped then in the future to actually do all of this further ahead. So I think these are all the silver linings of the lockdown cloud. Like Mr. Naidu was also sharing about that so much great work, the laws of motion, all of that was also discovered during lockdown. So we need to look at a positive in everything. Everything which is negative can be turned into something positive. And as educators, if we do not look at a positive in a negative situation, then who will look at it? Thank you, Chami.
Wow, Hussain, listening to you definitely itself is the silver lining. I'm sure a lot of teachers and parents out there who are listening must be feeling a sudden surge of positivity. And wow, you spoke about the kid who wants to become a stand-up comedian and has already started thanks to this. So, well, yes, there are a lot of positivities. I'm also going to explore Edpuzzle, as you have suggested, and I'm sure our listeners have taken note of that as well. At this point, I would also like to remind our viewers that we're taking questions as well. So please feel free to ask any questions at any point, and at the end of every question, we will also take the viewers' questions. So yeah, please, let's make it interactive. So coming back to Hussain, thank you for sharing all those positives that you feel and have experienced that have come from this pandemic, and what you shared about being a father and about the life skills that you are seeing your own son learning and experiencing at home. One thing about Hussain, what you spoke is that you're talking about a lot of technology oriented things, which is possible in the cities. I want to ask Ma'am Sawang here, of course, the positives of this pandemic from a very Bhutanese point of view, but at the same time, I'm sure it's very different in Bhutan, ma'am. And what are the positives here, and how different it is from what Mr. Hussain has just shared. Over to you, Ma'am Sawang.
Thank you very much, Chami. So now we are looking into the positive impact of lockdown or the silver lining. And I think in such a difficult situation, positivity makes us win battles and win the challenges. So I think the COVID-19 lockdown seemed to have favored Bhutan in many ways. First of all, I think it brought the whole nation together in body, mind, and speech. It once again proved how the Bhutanese loved their king, their country, and the people. Chami might have noticed in Bhutan, since she's with me here in Thimphu, the spontaneous compassion and generosity that was witnessed in this crisis will be remembered in the history of Bhutan. It brought all the Bhutanese from all walks of life together. National spirit and allegiance to the king, the country, and the people is at its highest now. And that is the biggest positive impact of the lockdown. Number two, the country moved towards for embracing technology as the answer for the 21st century learning and survival, which is, I think, very, very important. His Majesty's vision of a technological savvy Bhutan got its root now. Students, parents, and teachers all worked harder to learn the new techniques and implement them. The trial and error has made many very competent in using technology in their favor. Technology aided lessons and online lessons are here to stay definitely. And for me, being in this discussion for the first time itself has proved the silver lining of the lockdown. Thirdly, the students who are the future citizens have learned to be self-directed in their learning and have learned to be self-motivated, self-reliant in their quest for knowledge, skills, and values. This quality will see them do extremely well when they have to make informed decisions as they move on with life. The 10 core skills, which is the nucleus of the Bhutanese education system, which are self-awareness, empathy, critical thinking, creative thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, interpersonal relationship, coping with stress, effective communication, coping with emotions were enhanced during this period of homestay and digital learning. Fourthly, the techno-generation gap between the parents and the students have minimized, thus bringing more understanding between them. This facilitates more happy homes and families, which is the crux of a happy nation and world at large. Last but not the least, the biggest silver lining has been the healing of Mother Earth for the future generation, which is the nucleus of our gross national happiness. So, as a Bhutanese, I'm very proud that COVID-19 definitely has a lot of silver lining for us. Over to you, Chame.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I could go on listening, and I'm feeling already so much better listening to Mr. Hussain and you and Mr. Naidu about the positivity. For the viewers who are watching from India and from other parts of the world, I'm sure you're well aware of His Majesty, the King of Bhutan. Ma'am Sawang has mentioned him as well. And everything I think that is happening right now in Bhutan, everything good, it is because of leadership. And not going very off the topic here, but definitely would like to share that leadership here counts. And the positive impact Mam Sawang has spoken about, I think, definitely goes a lot to leadership. And at the same time, as Mam Sawang has said, and I was a little bit concerned when Hussain was talking about technology, and I was thinking, really, are we adapting? Are teachers adapting? Even in Bhutan, are they adapting? But after listening to you, Mam Sawang, I'm sure everybody is, and we are in good hands and on the right path. Mr. Naidu has already shared a lot of positivity in his first answer itself. But Mr. Naidu, I would like to ask you to put some light onto this. And then we will take our first question that has already come here from Zareen Babu. So first, over to you, Mr. Naidu, and then we'll get on to our first question.
Yes, thank you, Harmi. And it's so wonderful to hear from the land of gross happiness that everyone is looking at it in a very positive way. So it's interesting that you should say throw some light on it. So let's look at the question in itself about the lockdown and the silver lining in it. What is the silver lining? There's a dark cloud, there's a bright fringe or an outline to it, and there's a lovely life-nourishing sun hidden behind it. Most of the time in life, we end up looking at the cloud and we keep worrying about not seeing the sun. But the beauty lies in the edge of the cloud. It's the silver lining. And we know that if there's a silver lining, then there is a sun behind it. And so there will be revival and there will be energy behind that cloud. And that's what really it is. So the one aspect which I think has emerged so strongly is the recognition of the learner. The shift has gone from the teacher onto the learner. What do I mean by this? Most of our schooling in history, we have used the term pedagogy. Pedagogy is the teacher-centered learning. It is the art and science and of the profession of education. And we've only heard pedagogy. But in the last 20 years or so, new terms have come up to transform that. One term that has come up is andragogy. Andragogy is basically nothing else but a learner-centered approach. It is a self-directed learning. The learner comes into the center of it, and the learner basically goes in for experiential and for new aspects of learning. It's a kind of double loop learning. There's a psychological aspect to it. What does it mean to us? Every learner is asking, why am I learning this? What am I learning? Why am I doing this? Why should I do this? What good is it going to do to my career? Is it even going to make a career? So there's a lot of psychology involved in every aspect. And when there's psychology involved, the learning and the probing is far deeper. The other is behavioral, that everything is coming in with a sense of values, value systems. Just look at the way people are reaching out. Just look at the way people are coming out and helping people they don't even know exist on this planet. And things. It's the same with students. How much of reaching is going on in thinking about how to uplift humanity and not to just sit and moan and groan. And the third aspect that has come out of this is that it has become learner-driven, which in the educational terminology is called heutagogy. And that is about self-determined learning, which is slightly different from the self-directed learning. Self-determined learning is making choices, coming up with your own interpretation of what interests you and what is going to make sense to you. So the whole aspect of history, geography, sciences, the new language of construction, it's all becoming interdisciplinary. And the choices that the curriculums are giving is helping students more and more to probe and explore. And even if the curriculum is not, once they go onto the net, once they go beyond the textbook, there's a huge amount of learning. It's like the good old days when we used to go through the dictionary. Just to find the meaning of the pronunciation of one word, you went through the whole page. And through that, you picked up the meaning and pronunciation of 6, 8, 10 other words which you didn't know even existed in the language. That's really what is happening to the children. And they're browsing and they're getting more time. And by browsing and learning, they're going way beyond the textbooks, way beyond the curriculum, and they are self-determining what they really want to learn. So just to sort of conclude this aspect of the question, the curriculum framework has to now start giving more flexibility and freedom to different schools in different locations around the world to create some of their own norms. You can't have one size fits all. The situation in Bhutan is very different from the northeast of India, which is very different from the west of India, which is totally different from the south of India, for example, which is totally different from various other parts of the world. And so the curriculum, which offers this better, will be more attractive in the years to come, whichever curriculum it is. And honestly, the curriculums we're following right now are not bad at all. They are the sun behind the dark cloud. It is us, the educators, who create the dark cloud. And we need to now remove that cloud and let the sun shine in full glory, the curriculum, and let the learner interpret it in different ways. As Hussein said, there's theater, arts, history, sciences, environmental issues, music. Don't forget, these children are seeing rivers and the sky for the first time as blue as they can probably imagine. They're actually seeing stars in the cities and in the right kind of stars. And they're appreciating this aspect, which they didn't think existed and would ever exist in their lifetime. So we are actually rediscovering the world around us. And to finish this aspect, don't forget, that was Kabir who said, "Muh ko kahan tu dhoonde re bandhe, main to tere paas re." He said, why do you search for me everywhere when I am with you, in you? And he ended up so positively with the word Vishwas in that Doha. And he said, it's all in the faith and the inner belief that you have about how you want to go forward. It is the Vishwas. Thank you. Over to Charmi.
Thank you so much, sir. The word belief, it's so powerful. From gathering from what all three of us speakers have said, that positivity is depends on the teacher, on the educator. It is on us to take this belief forward and impart in the best way possible. We have also heard about how students are adapting, how they are coming up with new ideas to showcase their talents. As said by Mam Sawong, in Bhutan especially, communities have come together, country has come together as one and is fighting this pandemic, not just education, but everything. And of course, Mother Earth. Well, in Bhutan, we are fortunate. We always see the pristine blue sky, and we have a beautiful environment, which is so well preserved. But as Mr. Naidu said, kids are finally seeing the stars in the sky. They have the time. So one thing I would like to, bring to notice here is that Mr. Naidu, Hussain, even Mam Sawang, everybody spoke about life skills. Everyone spoke about how children are adapting to this format and how they're learning. They are choosing what to learn as well. So lifelong learners is something which is really coming out of the situation. But this also means that all our education system, the way we teach, has to be designed like that, even in the future, where children get the opportunity to choose what they want to learn and makes and make their learning more interesting. So, but thank you so much. I personally feel so by Zareen Babu. Do we feel with those not having access to technology or the knowledge? So, who would like to answer this? I would open this out to all three speakers. Who would like to take this question, please?
Dr. Naidu, okay, so I'll just share my initial thoughts, and I think then we can move to Dr. Naidu, since, I'm sure this is a question which is coming more from the Indian context. So I think, yes, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen, in the last 5 weeks is the gap, or, what ma'am also was referring to, the equity and the equality. There has definitely been an issue with access, because you have schools in the smaller towns of India or in the villages where not only is internet connectivity an issue, but also there is an issue in terms of having the right kind of gadgets to actually access the online teaching and learning. Hence, a lot of aided schools and public schools are utilizing different formats. So WhatsApp is a very popular social media tool that, a lot of Indians are already using on their smartphones. So in certain union territories and state governments, the teachers in aided schools are creating short videos, 2 to 3 minutes, for the concept that they're teaching, and they're sharing it with their learners on WhatsApp. Some schools are also making individual calls. So teachers are actually calling up once or twice a week and explaining that the work that they need to do with their child. What NCERT has also done is, just recently, I think a couple of weeks back, they've released an alternate academic calendar for primary school. So this consists of activities which parents can do within the confines of their home, and also ensure that, wherever there has been a pause in learning because of no access to technology or the internet, at least with these activities, their learning continues. So each of these activities is aligned or mapped with a specific area of the syllabus. But yes, going forward for a 5-week window, I think this all was effective. But if, we still continue with the online teaching learning paradigm, even in the future, then, the governments will need to seriously rethink of how we can ensure that, the educational content can reach all corners of the country, including the remotest of villages, probably utilizing, things. So I was hearing a webinar slightly earlier where somebody was talking about how in certain larger populous states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, they're planning on using Doordarshan to actually deliver educational content in the first half of the day. All India radio. So I think we'll also, as the government machinery, need to come up with creative ways of enhancing access to the remotest parts of our country and ensuring that those children don't get left behind.
Sorry, before Mr. Naidu takes over, there was somebody else also, as I was reading the comments on the site, somebody from Bhutan as well, who was asking a similar question. So I would like to pair that up. He was also asking how are Indian schools reaching, or Indian government reaching out to the students in remote parts of India in the remote villages, because we come back to the same thing here. If there is no, right now we're all connecting through technology. Everything is happening. The classes are happening because of technology. So what happens to students who are in the remote places, whether it is India or Bhutan? So Hussain, you've already put a lot of light in it.
Yes.
And Mr. Naidu, if you could take this further.
Yes, certainly. Almost 80% of the children going to schools in India are in schools, even in the cities, where things like connectivity, live streaming, and so on is not a reality. And it's very difficult, from facing power cuts to just not having the gadgets, to the large number of students. You just put it, to the teachers not quite equipped with the gadgets that they require. So are people just frozen and saying, what do we do? Not at all. I've seen samples. We interact with a lot of village schools around schools in around Gurgaon. These are rural schools. These are not in Gurgaon, but they are in the villages. And teachers have not stopped. What they're doing is they're using sheets of paper, solving a maths problem, making diagrams, this, that, whatever it is, taking screenshots of those and sending them by SMS. Children don't have phones. They don't have the connectivity. They're sending it to panchayat leaders. They're sending it to whoever has a phone in the village. And kids are crowding around that phone. And they're getting aspects, and they're sitting and doing the assignments. Then they're taking shots at it and sending it back to the teacher. So there's no limit to how we are going to innovate. I think we should go a little beyond the concerns of, do we have enough online? How are we going to cope with online? Yes, this could be a situation for the next 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, who knows? It could be. But we have to go beyond that. The point is, once students have got hooked onto this kind of exposure and learning, they will not enjoy the traditional way of looking at the textbooks with the teacher focusing on himself or herself and making it teacher-centric. So I think the whole education world has to start accepting the fact now that children are only going to get attracted towards schools and classrooms if the teachers make it exciting. Otherwise, they're going to say, look, I'm going to confine myself to home learning. You send it on the net and I'll do it at home, or you send it wherever and I'll do it wherever I can connect. This is a great opportunity for the country to take the children back to their roots, to rural India. Why shy away from the world they live in, from horticulture and agriculture and waste management and water harvesting and all these aspects? Why not start throwing that into a local curriculum? And why not make it mandatory that now that children have started observing these aspects more and more, make it a part of the curriculum? So what if it's not in the textbook? So what if it's not going to be tested? Most children are beginning to believe that whether I sit for an exam or I don't, is it really going to matter? They don't know how the universities are going to choose them. So their mind is in a different zone. And we should go beyond online, offline classrooms and so on into what is going to make the learner excited. And whatever is going to start moving in that direction. Thank you. Over to Jeremy.
Okay, so from this, I think it's more about moving to that direction. But right now, of course, we don't have very definite answers about certain things. And especially when we talk about children in the remote parts of India and Bhutan or in the world who don't have access to technology. But I had, the last I was speaking to Ministry of Education, I did hear that they are preparing prints. They are preparing a lot of material to send it to certain remote villages where children do not have access to television, internet, or and probably they have radio. I also heard that radio stations are coming up with some lessons as well. We have Kuzu FM here that's coming up with some lessons as well. So yes, I think, I hope the people who had asked this question have got some insight into it. So are we taking our second question here? Do we have our second question up? Okay, here it is. It's from Mr. Kadri. Hello, Mr. Kadri. Hope you're doing well. Is it time for a complete revamp of the syllabus, pedagogy and proceed towards a new universal syllabus? What a great question. I think, Ma'am Sawang, would you like to put some light onto this?
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kedri, for this very well thought out question. Yes, I think after COVID-19 and the year that has come till today, definitely there is no way we're going to go back to what we did in 2019 or the years before. I think now we are gearing towards a new system of education. And here, I think, as an educator for the last 38 years, I somehow feel there is a need to now look towards a more universal education where we, I think, look into more of values. I think this is how we need to now move towards, because in such a pandemic like now, you must have realized how people survived, how the countries are surviving, and I think it will all go down to the value system we have. Example, in Bhutan, during the lockdown, we are very law-abiding citizens, so we immediately follow the request or the laws that are set by the government. So things work well for us. So I feel definitely we are moving towards a universal education where there is no barriers, where I think curriculum would be definitely defined by what the new world would want our younger generations to be. And to be would be the main focus for our new generations to come up. So I would definitely feel more of human values, humanness in education system, and more focus on the values than the content as we are now looking into. People are worried the children are not learning. What are they not learning? The content. But as my other two esteemed speakers shared with you, in the end, I think it's who you are, which will ultimately see you being a very successful citizen of the world. So, Ma'am Chami, I definitely feel this is the right time to move towards bringing in the best of thinking into trying to come up with a universal education platform where you again might want to use some technology because it is the world of technology, definitely. And at the same time, also accepting that there is beauty in the remote and the rural communities, the culture, the traditions, which I think has to be imbibed for survival of the uniqueness in each community, each country, each nation. Thank you. Chami, back to you.
So rightly and so beautifully put, Ma'am Sawang. You're right. What are they not learning? They're probably not learning content. Content can be learned at any given point, but what's important is who you are, who they are, what they become. And I think an education that has values in it is so important. And being an performing arts director, being an arts educator, I feel and I see a lot of room. That's why for the arts in this. I'm not going to push arts into this conversation. I'm sure we can have that on a different day. It requires its own space, but so well shared by Ma'am Sawang, so well put it together. Thank you so much, ma'am. And now we don't have much time left. So again, I would like to ask even Hussain and Mr. Naidu here. This is very important because we also have probably a lot of parents watching our show today. And how has our dynamic, the parent, student, teacher dynamic changed because of this? And because earlier you have parents coming to school and asking about how their children are doing and what they need to do, and there is this constant relationship, but that dynamic has changed as well. Also, I would like to say here that in Bhutan, because we're still working, many of us are still working, parents really don't have that much time as yet to stay at home and work with their kids. Kids are probably doing a lot of work on their own. So yes, please, over to you, Hussain, Mr. Naidu, whoever would like to go first.
Yes, I think Mr. Naidu, you can start off. I'll share my thoughts after you.
All right. I think on a lighter side, the parents are the ones who have really started accepting the beauty of this profession called education. They suddenly realize how difficult it is to get students to concentrate, focus, and imbibe all kinds of ideas that happens in schools, but parents think we are not doing enough of it. So that's a great awakening. But I think I will only come up with one point here because of the paucity of time. I've been saying this for the last 10 years, that by 2035, 75% of the jobs which exist or existed before COVID would not be there by 2035. And it will be a new world, and everyone will have to adapt to how they work. So what you're learning in schools is not so much of what you know, but how you adapt to what you don't know. It is adapting to the unknown and creating new things. COVID-19 has fast forwarded that, and I think by 2021, 75% of the jobs that existed are not going to exist. How are people going to work in malls? How are they going to travel? How are the shops going to run? How a business is going to run? How is everything going to happen? It's going to have a new definition. And people will have to keep redefining. Will they be employed by others? Will they employ themselves? So really, entrepreneurship, creating and self-determining what you really want to learn and what you want to do with your lives is going to be the future. And I think Ma'am Chewangin said it so beautifully, that it is believing in yourself. It is determining who you really are. And I think children have discovered this more and more. Teachers have learned to discover the students more and more through this. They have seen different elements. They're looking, if there are 24 or 30 in a classroom, they're looking at 24 or 30 different individuals now, rather than one mass of humanity. And that is the beauty of the way we are going forward. So I think, yes, the curriculum, the learning, it all have to be done. And I hope the schools will be courageous enough to bring in their own element. Let it be 10%, 20%, 25%. But let's not get bogged down with the predetermined syllabus and the curriculum. Let's bring in our own local dimensions to it.
Second, that aspect that we need to move away from curriculum or a textbook driven approach. Sadly, even in these 5 weeks, we've had so many parents even writing to the schools that we at SLN manage, in terms of that what is going to happen. There are certain chapters which are remaining. So as a community, we need to obviously look at now moving more towards learning outcomes, towards 21st century skills, life skills, like Ms. Pong just mentioned, because those suddenly will become much more important in this uncertain environment that we are living in. Another aspect, I think, which I've not touched upon earlier, is the importance of collaboration. So I think now is truly the time for schools to actually collaborate with each other. Sadly, unlike in Bhutan, where the directives flow from top down and everyone tends to follow, be it private or public schools, in India we have every school in every city, in every center, is doing something on their own. Everyone is trying out. So even when it came to the online teaching and learning, every school tried out a different practice. Everyone has tried out a different model. Learning outcomes are set differently for every school, depending on their context, depending on their curriculum, etc. I think now is the time when schools need to collaborate. Sharing of best practices is something which now needs to definitely happen. So at SLN, in fact, we actually took the lead in this, and 6 months back, we created a platform called the SLN Global Network. The idea of this network, there is zero fee for it. The idea for all of us to set up this network was, how can we get schools to collaborate? How can we share best practices? So, like ma'am mentioned, there is some amazing work which is happening in a Bhutanese school. Why can't a school in Mumbai use some of those practices, probably customize it, keeping our context in mind? And I think what COVID-19 has shown us is collaboration is definitely the way forward. It's not competition. So I think having collaborative networks, and here I would like to, commend American School of Bombay. What American School of Bombay has done is they've actually put out all their lesson plans, all their activities, because they've got an entire curriculum for online teaching and learning. And I know a lot of state board schools have actually utilized some of those activities, customized it, keeping their context in mind. So I think going forward is collaboration is the name of the game. And the more schools can collaborate, the more we can share the best teaching and learning practices, the more all our learners across, be it in the remotest corner of UP or Bihar, or be it in a city like Mumbai or Delhi, everyone can benefit. Thank you, Chami. Hi, I think we're just having some network issues at Chami's end. And that's about it. Thank you, audience, for joining us. Thank you, Ma'am Shivong. Thank you, Chami, for moderating this entire panel discussion. And a big thank you to Dr. Naidu also for sharing his perspective, his take. It was really interesting even for me. There were so many takebacks even for me. So I think all these webinars is, I think, a great learning platform for all of us as educators, because there is so many ideas that, both of you all have shared and bounced across. I'm sure I'll use some of these when I have the next meeting of teachers to incorporate some of these best practices in our own school teaching and learning. Thank you very much once again.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe and
thank you.